Now it is visible.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for this generous introduction. I would start my presentation by thanking GMEC for this wonderful opportunity to share my thoughts on Paulo Freire. And I extend my warm greetings and I acknowledge my indebtedness to all the senior professors and academicians who have come together to form this wonderful forum. And I wish all the best to GMEC. Dr. Manish Jaiswal, who has been instrumental in making this a reality, today's session, and Dr. Devabrata Singh, who is chairing the session, and Professor Shahidullah, and also we had Professor Pushpendra Pal Singh earlier. I greet all of you and thank you very much for being here today with us. So basically, this presentation is about, on one hand, it is philosophical in nature. On the other hand, it is extremely personal in nature. Basically, I'm not delivering a talk today. I'm trying to share a few thoughts which come across the mind of a decade-old media educator standing in today's media scenario. And basically, I'm sharing these thoughts to verify whether I'm thinking in the right line or not, to get my thoughts validated by the leading luminary of media education. So it is titled Pedagogy of the Oppressed and Development Communication, Rethinking Challenges and Possibilities on Freire's Centennary. The presentation is, of course, dedicated to Freire, who touches 100 years this year. And I was introduced to Freire at a very young age. I was born and brought up in the city of Kolkata, and at very young age, I was introduced to the art of theatre. And it is theatre which actually introduced me to Freire. There was a time when we were involved in a very progressive theatre movement in Kolkata, and that led us to the likes of Boal and ultimately to Freire. And later on, when I linked up with this discipline of mass communication, I understood Freire much deeper in the sense. So the entire Freire's thoughts and ideologies are basically rooted in a very, very core Marxian concept. And as we say that the pedagogy is a critical pedagogy, and the roots of critical pedagogy lies in critical theory. And here I have to mention Horkheimer, who had actually introduced the very core concept of critical theory, the critical thinking, which forms the very essence of Freire's critical pedagogy. We as human beings are gifted with brain and a mind, a beautiful mind, as we say. And we are blessed with the ability to think, to differentiate what is right and what is wrong. And there is ultimate liberation. The theology, liberation theology, speaks about this capability and its application, free application. Our social system, the political system, the power equation creates an obstacle in free thinking, creates an obstacle in the path of this liberation. And that is where exactly the core of critical thinking comes. Critical thinking is a parallel or an alternative to imposed thinking. The art of imposition is as old as human civilization. Right from the day human civilization started, free thinking and imposition is running side by side. And imposition has always been getting the better out of the two. So therefore, as a counter to this imposition, the critical theory emerged. And as all of us in the discipline of mass communication, we know that the Frankfurt School and other social scientists, along with Horkheimer, they gave us a wonderful body of thought and discourses on dialectics, which help us to form a critical thinking. the sole aim of critical theory and the critical pedagogy is to facilitate critical thinking, something which is always gets covered up or which is buried by the political forces. So basically, if we say the essence of the critical pedagogy lies in the thought of human beings being producers of their own historical form of life. No one writes our history, no one decides what our life will be, but it is we who have to actually form an opinion and direction of the life, and to liberate human beings from the circumstances that enslave them. So it is very clear that there are circumstances which are always trying to capture the human mind, the beautiful mind, our independent thinking. And we have to avoid them, we have to evade them, we have to counter them, and we have to challenge them. And that is the entire essence of liberation. So basically, if we see, we start with education as a concept, because Freire's pedagogy was, the core concept was based on education. Although various disciplines of social sciences have actually adapted Freire's pedagogy according to their own needs. I was thinking, the pandemic was mentioned, and this entire online teaching, which we have all been actually getting used to in the recent times, those 2 years. Thankfully, now we have students on the campus. I was going through a report by UNICEF that it is unimaginable the number of children who have actually been left out of education during this pandemic period because they didn't have the means to online education. It is not inclusive. So there are so many children who didn't go to school and who are deprived of education. And education, whatever, there has been so many commissions, there has been so many pedagogies, there has been so much thought regarding how to, step up education. But the point is that Freire always maintained that education is a tool, both a tool to legitimize inequity, and it can be used to get rid of the false consciousness of being educated. We sometimes we feel that we are educated actually, but that might not be the case. There are so many, we have degrees and diplomas and everything, but it is a false consciousness. Probably we are accumulating knowledge, not really understanding what is knowledge, not realizing what knowledge means to us. And this is where the entire concept of oppression, as envisaged by Freire, comes. So basically, the Freire, on a very, very Marxian line, he divided the society into two classes, the oppressor and the oppressed. On one hand, the oppressor are the privileged classes, people who have access to all kinds of, privileges and the means. They are working for supremacy, to establish an order which suits them. And they're also working to establish an order which they want others to believe that, yes, this is the order, this is the thing, this should be done, this should be followed, this is right, and this is good. Again, it is a very imposed kind of a thing. And in order to maintain that order, in order to maintain that power equation, power structure, they resort to divisive politics. They divide the society into groups, and they always ensure that there is no unity between the people. And what happens is they create a social and cultural order where things are very, very formulaic. For example, see, for any activity today, we have a particular system and well-established conventions. Who created the convention? So it is always a group of people who actually create the convention. And whenever you go out of convention, whenever you try to do something which is not conventional, you are not accepted. it is difficult to accept something which is very unconventional. And in a process where this order gets more and more established, the order gets firmly rooted into the roots of the society. The oppressed people, they start losing the power to analyze. They start losing the capability to understand even that they are being oppressed. So sometimes they really undergo an inferiority complex, and they really think that yes, whatever the oppressor is saying is right, and I am not fit to take that position. I am here only to be a follower, and I am not the leader. I cannot be a leader. If I become a leader, that will lead to a catastrophe. So what Freire says is this is a cultural invasion. There was an original culture. We have imposed something on that, and we have created an environment where people forget their original culture. Submersion of the belief, the abilities, and the positivity which is inherent to a society. So, in the pedagogy of the oppressed, Freire puts forward an alternative to the conventional order, social order, which is going on. He says, now let us equate these points to the education system. Pushpendraji was saying about that banking concept. So even, I mean, it was written in 1968, but are we doing anything very different from what was happening that time, which compelled Freud to write this treatise? I don't feel so. Basically, what we are doing is we are engaging in an one-way communication, and we are basically trying to show that we know many things. Our students, we don't have expectation from our students. We don't believe that as students they can be at equals from with us. So when a teacher goes inside the classroom, he always stands on the stage and he thinks, I'm one up, so I'm here to give, not to take. The concept of taking, even the questioning, is getting ridiculed. If you ask questions, you are ridiculed in the classroom. So Freire said that let us replace this one-way communication with a dialogic communication. He emphasized that not what is there already. Let us not deliberate on it. Let us recreate. He emphasized on creation of content facilitated by a two-way communication between the learner and the teacher. He said that let us replace communics with communication. Communics, the press releases and the information. This, I remember one of my teachers had once said that nowadays students don't come to the class for information because Google is there. So don't give them information. A very eminent teacher had told that you, as a teacher, your function is to basically interpret, not to inform, because information is easily available. So what Freire was saying is that you replace communics with communication. Let there be a two-way process, not one way. And that the students or the learners are not mere objects, but they should become the subject themselves, and they should become one of the prime players in the topic which is being discussed. So as we see, the convention and the unconvention, both the elements are at conflict with each other. The objective behind this pedagogy was to enable the learners to think critically, independently, not to go by the face value, not to believe what is already there, not to believe in the popular version, but to question, to verify, to research, and to basically create the to reach the actual problems. There is a tendency to hide the actual problems and to put on surface issues that are of less importance. But Freire said no, we should think about the real issues, we should reflect and act accordingly. So he hinted at a process which would gradually take us a thinking process followed by an action, and he named it praxis. So liberation, the ability to achieve the ability to critical thinking through praxis. That is the core essence of the pedagogy. Generative themes is a very important term which Freire used, that let us generate the themes. What are the issues that are affecting our lives? Not to be decided by others, but by the people who are facing it, by the people who are into the process. The aspirations, what do we want to become? What is the life for us? And to strive to involve oneself into activism to achieve that goal. And of course, enhancement in awareness. If you are not aware, you cannot act. There is, as I said, that a revolutionary concept is always challenging the existing norms. So, on one hand, where a propaganda is going on about the existing order, I do not want to name any particular ruling class or a political party or a leader who is creating hegemony or who is establishing the order, who is the symbol of status quo. But in all countries, if you see the history of the world, be it leftist, be it rightist, a monarch or a democratic leader, everywhere power has the same characteristics. So there is a propaganda which aims to establish a power structure, and Freire is positing cooperation to counter propaganda. He is positing unity as against the divisiveness. He's saying that people must come together in order to realize what lies in their own interest. They should organize themselves systematically to avoid the manipulations which are being done by the ruling class. And in the due course of the process, he is envisaging the emergence of the real cultural norms as against the established cultural norms, which again we have termed as imperialism. So now, having given a brief overview of this Freire's pedagogy, now I would like to basically link it with development communication, which is a very important discipline, sub-discipline in our discipline. So if we see that most of the development discourses have, if we categorize those development discourses, we'll see that they can be, there is a top-down approach, you can say a vertical approach, and there has been a parallel approach which is circular in nature. So on one hand, if I trace the history of development from in the post-World War scenario, the Bretton Woods School, they had prescribed the use of the mass media for acting as a catalyst to development, where it was felt that, especially in the third world countries and the developing nations, people were not enough aware and they were not properly informed. And so the mass media would actually become an instrument of awareness and information. Now, what we ignored in this Bretton Woods prescription, the part which was ignored was the cultural part. It is, suppose in a country like India and in many third world countries, where cultures change every 100 kilometers, it is not actually possible to have a uniform media or a uniform media language or a uniform media approach to communicate to people belonging to different cultures and states, linguistic and ethnic origins. Therefore, again, during the 70s of the last the millennium, we had this alternative thought of involving people in their own development process. And we had terms like development support communication. And finally, UNESCO has come up with communication for development. So basically, the core idea of the alternative paradigm as to the dominant paradigm is that it is the involvement of the people which matters. The people whom we want to develop should participate in the process of development. And like what happens very much in India is that people sitting in the capital city in air-conditioned rooms, they decide the policy for the people, for the development and upliftment of the people who are at the grassroots in the villages. So there is somewhere there is a connect is not there. It is the only people who are facing the problem can actually understand what is the problem, where it pinches, and then only the media suited to their to address their needs can address those issues. And that media also has to have that cultural and aesthetic element in it. A media which is uniform, which is created, the aesthetics of media which is created to reap profit, to appeal to most of the people, or to appeal to the urban people, to the educated people, may not be the right choice to communicate to the people at the margins, at the villages, at the grassroots. Now, the point is that, see, if we take India, for example, when after the independence, India followed the policy of welfare government. As we know, there was a huge socialistic influence on the policies of which we followed. If we look at the 5-year plan documents after the independence, we'll see that there's a huge socialistic influence, and welfare measures were being taken, and there were support schemes and so many projects, bank nationalization, and these kind of measures were taken. After the globalization in the 1991, things started changing. It became a mixed economy. And slowly today, with the disinvestment and merging of banks, closure of public sector undertakings, survival of the fittest, survival of only the one who reaps profit has become the mool mantra. So there is a paradigm shift from the mixed economy to a very, very core capitalistic economy. The trends are already there for everyone to see. So what approach should the media have now? So already we have seen that the Indian media, specifically during the pandemic years, we have seen what a tremendous, catastrophe of onset of misinformation and disinformation. We were taken by surprise, and we were disbelieving, and we were always checking. We have fact-checking workshops all around, and we are compelled to, surf from one channel to the another channel. And that has been the very character of the media right from the globalization era. So media industry nexus, whose media it is, if I ask, it is basically the corporates media. It is the media's role has become very, very mercenary. They are working to give publicity to the products and services of the corporate sector. And as Noam Chomsky, one of the great thinkers of our times, has rightly pointed out, he has said that, again, going back to that word, imposition, the media, instead of facilitating independent thinking, it is imposing. I decide what you think. Setting the agenda, the framing the various concepts, various characters, various phenomena. They're basically not allowing the people, the audience, to think, to use their brains, but they're actually telling the audience that this has happened and this is what you should believe. So we have created an audience which doesn't think, and it is a mediated hegemony. The media decides how to think. Something has happened, someone has died, there is a fire, there is a riot. What do? We don't understand. We don't think about it. What is the stand we should take? So we switch on. We see the channels. What are they saying? Oh, let me check out. What is that XYZ channel saying? So there is a dependence. And this is where exactly, again, Freire becomes very relevant, even in 2022 in his Centennary. So Chomsky himself, while appreciating the Freire's ideas, he has admitted that basically we are teaching to test, and that is what is our education system. I mean, what do we do in the universities and colleges? Basically, we test memories. We test memories. We ask them to write based on their memories. there is I mean, what Freire advocated was that we use education for raising the consciousness. That is exactly the function of the media also. What was the ideals of Mahatma Gandhi? What were the ideals of all those great editors of those newspapers which participated and supported the Indian national movement? So, I mean, the upheaval, the raising of consciousness, yes, the freedom matters. That newspaper became such an important force during the freedom struggle of India that there had to be some laws framed to stop the media from action. So, where is that strength of media today? Why can't the media is there any single incident where the mass media has been believed by the people to come down on the streets and to fight for a genuine cause, which was not supported by an organized political party or a corporate? We don't find instances. So basically, what Chomsky said, that Freire tells us today that we are actually spoon fed. Now, the question is, after having discussed all these things, the legitimate question which comes is that, so what do we do about it? Can we change the system? Is there any way to change the system? I mean, the television channels, the newspapers, the web portals, all of them, they are divided on a certain ideological basis. If we say more clearly, they are basically, they have committed audiences, they have the share of audiences. They know that these are the people who are actually going to subscribe to our views, and based on that figure and number, the entire media market economy depends. So, I mean, what is the way out here? Theater of the Oppressed is something which I would like to mention here. It has already been mentioned very nicely by Professor Shahidullah. But what I today, why I brought up this Theater of the Oppressed is not only because it is a direct offshoot, it is created under the direct influence of the pedagogy of the oppressed, but theater is one such medium which has not been purchased. Why I say this? Because the roots of theater lies in our traditional media. If you remember our own old days, the culture which is still prevalent in the rural Indian life, the kirtans, the pachalis, the akhras, the all the tribal rituals, they have not been purchased till now. They are as honest and as pure as they were. And it is difficult to purchase because they are born out of human experiences. And that is exactly what Theatre of the Oppressed does. Boal devised a system based on the philosophy of the pedagogy of the oppressed by Freire. And I mean, it takes an entire 2-hour session to describe Theatre of the Oppressed. I would just mention here one of the concepts which Boal has applied very nicely. As I already told earlier in my deliberation, that Freire always emphasized on dialogue, dialogic action. Similarly, Boal has replaced the word spectators. See, here again, he's challenging the convention. What happens in normal cultural performances? We purchase a ticket, we go to the auditorium, we sit down in the air conditioned hall, and it is dark. On the stage, the artist is there, they are singing, they are acting, we see, and we come back. So we are only mere spectators. But Boal has replaced the word spectators with spect actors. SPECT, spect actors. That means the audience will no longer be mere spectators, but they will involve themselves in the performance of a theater. So when the theater happens, it is not only about a few artists. The entire audience, they are also the artists. They get, and that is exactly what happens in Prahlad Natak in Ganjam of Odisha. If you go and watch Prahlad Natak, the audience is equally involved as the performers are. So we remove this. This is exactly what Mr. Badal Sarkar also did in his third theatre. Badal Sarkar said, I won't perform on stage because stage creates a level between the performer and the audience. He said that the actor will come down to the level of the audience. And forum theatre is another concept of Boal. Boal said that at one point of time, the performance will stop and will throw the question to the audience that what do we do now? And the audience come up with solution which is enacted. So I'm saying the democratization process of the entire convention is being taking place. Now, you'll all be very happy and also appreciate the fact that Koraput, the place where I am in, it is in the margins of Odisha. It's in the border of Andhra Pradesh and Odisha, and one side we have Chhattisgarh. So it's a place which is infested by, which has a history of Maoist movement. You know, the Koraput, Srikakulam, and Naxalbari were the three places where the fire was lit up during the 70s, during the Naxalbari movement. So there is a place, a village, a remote village of Shibaguda, where some activists, they inspired the villagers to do drama on their problems. So the problem, there was a huge discussion first, the dialogue, which Freire said. And out of the discussion, it came up that it is education which is the problem. A drama was created to show how the children of the village, they face difficulty in crossing the certain stretch of land and reaching the schools. It is so remote, it is so difficult to reach the schools. A bridge is needed. There are some facilities were to be needed. A canal was needed, and they went and performed it right in at first in their own village. Everyone agreed, yes, this is our problem and this is the solution. Then they went to the district collector. They acted the drama in front of the district collector and made the collector commit that the canal will be built. So this is a classic example of Freire's pedagogy being applied in real life. The age of social media has given us new avenues, and basically it has empowered the individual. Freire has been continuously, telling about the developing the capability to rejoice your own culture, your own rituals, your own roots, and to celebrate your being, not being ashamed of it. A small place like Koraput is getting the small things which happen in this land is getting coverage in a internet-based forum, a radio hosted purely on I mean the Facebook page, and sometimes some free apps. It is Radio Koraput. Please check out. You will be astonished to see that one of the most backward districts of Odisha and India being highlighted, small things being highlighted in such a way, the local talents, the power cut timing, and what not, everything, the turnouts in the panchayat election, everything. We are rejoicing Koraput, its nature, its beauty, and everything. It has given an identity to a new place called Koraput. I mean, I can go on and on and on, but let us hope that this is the first of many more discussions regarding the common people of our country, the people which has actually been abandoned, the people's interest which have been abandoned today by the commercial mass media. And if we don't think about the people, how do we actually find the salvation of our media education? So I leave with these thoughts and with two very important quotes. One to both of the very important playwrights and theatricians, Bertolt Brecht, who in Germany, who led the Berliner Ensemble. In one of his plays, he wrote, "Then unhappy the land which breeds not a hero, unhappy the land which always needs a hero." So, I mean, let us stop searching for the hero. Our hero is very near to us. Our hero lies in the villages. Our hero lies in the people. And as Bijan Bhattacharya wrote, as a precursor to his famous Navanno, which created the IPTA revolution, the cultural revolution in India. And he said, I have seen my hero in the fields. He is very strong. He holds a plow in hand. Today on Freire Centennary, we only aspire and we hope that we follow Freire's ideals and let us put back man, humanity in the center stage of all kinds of communication. What communication, what kind of development do we want? Do we want material development or do we want human development? Let us again develop the beautiful mind. Thank you very much. And I'm really grateful for your patience.